I think it's really incredible that Erin Arvidlin was able to write her book about Bernie Madoff in only 5 months. I can't imagine what that was like.
Yeah, I actually had the chance to sit down with Erin Arvidlin in August to talk about writing the book.
Let's listen to that now.
So here for the Penguin Business Beat is my interview with Erin Arvidlin, author of Too Good to Be True. I guess you first wrote about Madoff in 2001, and so your piece was published in Barron's, I believe, at the time.
Yes.
And how was it received when it first came out?
At the time, nothing happened afterwards. There was total silence, even though one of the red flags in the article was that Madoff asked his investors not to tell anyone that he managed their money, which, on Wall Street, people love to brag about how much money they make, so it just didn't make any sense.
Why do you think people would go along with that? If you're investing with someone, why would you say, sure, I won't tell anyone that you have my money and I won't ask you any questions?
I think people don't like to be judged on the decisions they make about their money. It's a very personal decision. And so they felt like, well, I came in, I found Madoff through a friend or my uncle or my doctor. So, and this is an exclusive club and I don't want to complain. So they felt like they were getting into, a VIP group and didn't want to say anything bad.
Do you think that's part of why the backlash has been so extreme, that people had this personal relationship with Bernie Madoff?
For sure.
What do you think would have happened if the SEC had actually responded to your article and come in 2001 and just shut Madoff down?
Boy, I probably wouldn't have written this book. At the time, I wasn't the only one who was raising these red flags. There was a whistleblower by the name of Harry Markopoulos who was sending letters to the SEC, and I think they thought he was just a nutcase or something. But he was totally right on. And I think had the SEC listened to him, a lot of people would have been saved a lot of money and pain.
Would there still have been large losses if the scheme had fallen apart at that point?
Yes. I think by 2001, Madoff, my estimate at that time was that he was running between $7 and $10 billion. I think others had it as high as 15, maybe 20 billion.
Okay. So small change
compared to... It would have been a smaller but still very significant Ponzi scheme.
Right. I guess the thing that really surprised me when I was reading your book is that he was a very successful investment banker in his own right. He was his legitimate business was very successful.
Right.
So
why bother?
Yeah, why bother?
It's a good question. I think part of the reason that I explore in the book is that it started back with his father-in-law, Saul Alpern. Bernie Madoff married Ruth Madoff in 1959. Then he started the firm in 1960, and they actually worked out of his father-in-law's accounting offices very briefly. And as a result of that, I think it was such an incestuous relationship that he couldn't stop it. He had his father-in-law's clients, his father-in-law's best friends, other best friends, their best friends, and I think over time he just couldn't say no.
He was just afraid of letting people down?
Yeah, at least that's what he said at his sentencing. Ruth Madoff, actually, I have a crazy theory about Ruth Madoff, which is that she was a very smart lady. She was very educated for her time. She graduated from college in an era when a lot of women didn't go to college. She had a head for numbers. She was with Bernie from the beginning, and she kept the books for his legitimate business starting in 1960. So it's very hard to believe that she at least didn't have an idea of what was going on. In my wildest speculation, I sometimes wonder if she masterminded the whole thing. Because
she'd be the Bonnie to his Clyde.
Exactly, or Lady Macbeth, as it were. In part because, she had a very successful father. I think he wanted the best for Ruth, and she was married to this guy who was, really up and coming on Wall Street and was very ambitious. And if it was a Ponzi scheme that would make him successful, so be it. Now, I have no proof of that, but I don't think Bernie Madoff could have done it without his wife. So,
and you were at the sentencing,
mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like being in the courtroom on that day?
It was totally electric. First of all, it was packed, and we had to stand in line for several hours to get in. But it was open to the public, which I thought was which was great. I think it's important, that regular people be able to see that kind of thing. Right. Madoff had been in prison awaiting sentencing for a few months. He's a little bit thinner. He has a silvery, kind of pewter-colored gray hair, which was a little bit longer. His wife was not present.
Oh.
No family members were present. And in fact, the judge, Denny Chin at the time, noted that no one had written a single letter in support of Madoff. Whereas a lot of the victims of his fraud were in the courtroom and read letters to the judge. And that was really heart-wrenching. One woman talked about how she was digging in dumpsters to make ends meet.
Well, I'm sure it's so easy to just paint him as a complete monster,
mm-hmm,
and to cheer for all these people who are sort of showing him up in the courtroom. But looking at him, do you feel any sympathy for him at all of what he's going through, or are you just totally able to sign him off?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't feel sympathy for him as much as I do for some of his family members, especially the family members who worked for him, who had no idea what was going on. We don't know exactly who those people are. There's speculation that his wife, Ruth, knew, that his sons may have known. I definitely believe his brother, Peter Madoff, will be indicted because he was sending in false filings to the SEC, and they could just get him on that. Okay. But then there were all these other people who worked for him who had no idea.
What's the initial feedback from your readers?
Well, I put my email address in the foreword, I think, or it was in the introduction, because I wanted people to be able to write to me and say, tell me what they thought. A lot of people have written so far, and they like the book, and they have additional questions. So it's good because it shows me what else needs to be told.
Great. And we can put that up on our website,
sure,
too, if listeners to this podcast would like to ask questions
Absolutely.
of Erin. So our website is us.penguingroup.com, and once you're there, go to the publisher's office and send in your questions for Erin. What's next? What happens in this unfolding story?
I think the juiciest parts to come out will be finding out about Bernie Madoff's wife, Ruth, whether she knew, whether his sons, Andrew and Mark Madoff, knew, and who else either knew about the scam or was involved in creating all these phony statements and essentially building up the biggest phony business in history.
So do you feel like, having worked on this book and interviewed all these people, is it harder for you to trust people now? Do you feel like you personally have changed?
I probably have. I feel a little more cynical about the world and about people in general. On the other hand, I feel like people are finally asking the right questions. But yeah, personally, I think it's always good to, I guess, assume the worst and hope for the best.
Well, Erin, thanks for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Courtney.
We wish you the best of luck in everything you're doing next, and we look forward to the paperback of Too Good to Be True, which is coming out next year.
That's right. Thank you for having me.